well, the thing that is also like the most personal to me, which is having lost my mom and like having navigated that grief through my whole life, would have felt like the thing I wanted to protect the most and not share, right? But it's
Yeah.
also like the biggest source of my lived experience and my knowledge. And so I think that thought leadership really is what is at the heart of who you are. And that's different for everyone, right? For me, it started with grief in a lot of ways. But for other people, it's like the trajectory of their career. If they're the first in the company to do XYZ thing, to hold a specific leadership role, to navigate the space that they're in as a whatever it may be. And that is the vessel by which you're trying to pour into other people ultimately.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think with thought leadership, people think that it's supposed to be some sort of contrarian opinion that you
Mm-hmm.
hold, or it has to be like your unique point of view on XYZ. And I think that's where it gets lost because it sounds like the thought leadership that comes from true stories and your most potent lived experience
Mm-hmm.
is the thought leadership that's going to connect with people. Welcome to Side Note, the podcast, where we explore the intersection of business and intuition. I'm your host, Samantha Fackler, a Fortune 100 marketing advisor turned leadership coach who has worked with over 100 companies across 13 years and counting. And yes, I also keep crystals on my desk. I love astrology, and I'm a trained Reiki master. So I see the connections that other people miss. Join me for conversations that'll change how you think about business, life, and everything in between. Welcome to this episode of Side Note. We are joined by Vivian Nunez, writer and content strategist, and the owner of In Good Company Substack. Viv, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Can we tell them that we started our whole pre-podcast production with a little meditation? Because I feel like that sets the most beautiful of intentions. And I'm hoping people are able to carry that with them wherever they're listening from.
Yeah, absolutely. So right before we hit record, Viv and I did a little meditation to
Mm-hmm.
ground into the energy, connect with each other, and just set intentions for this conversation. It's something new I'm trying out with guests, and it was really lovely. I enjoyed that.
I think it helps, and it is such a common thread. It's one of the things that we connected with from our initial conversation is just how much storytelling and bringing your full self to whatever you're doing work wise starts with like the energy you're committing to it and how you're envisioning the outcome when someone is consuming it, and not from like a comparative point of view or a judgmental point of view, but just like I hope someone receives it with as much integrity as I created it, which can always, and that gets like
Really,
shuffled and jumbled in the mix in the process, but hopefully that integrity kind of sticks through.
completely. I think there are energetics to writing and storytelling. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I know recently I've been talking a lot about like how to use AI and how to help your business repurpose content with it. But I always urge people like you need to edit it at the end of that so that your energetic fingerprint is still on it
Mm-hmm.
because people really do feel your energy through the words and how you use them. And I think now more than ever with social media, it's like people can break the
Yeah.
grammar rules and write whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited for this conversation with you because you have a huge background when it comes to writing. I mean, you've worked with companies like Calm and Logitech, really owning their content. You've worked with CEOs and leaders on thought leadership, and you yourself have grown such an impressive ecosystem with your own writing. So, I guess taking a step back, I love to
Mm-hmm.
talk about thought leadership in general because I think this audience, there are a lot of thought leaders listening and aspiring thought leaders,
Mm-hmm.
as well as people who don't think of themselves as thought leaders but are. So,
Mm-hmm.
what does thought leadership really mean to you?
You know, it's so interesting because as you were working through my intro, I'm like, wow, that seems like a lot. And also it's like 10 years worth of things that are kind of brought down to three sentences. And I think that that ultimately is the heart of thought leadership. It's what are you standing on that then you can tell someone else about in its most simplest form, right? And then how you tell that story and what platforms you choose to do that and the way you frame it up is the particulars of who you are as a unique person. But I also think that it is important for thought leadership to really envelop what humanness you're bringing to the table, right? I don't think that 10 years ago when I started, I thought that writing about grief and mental health and anxiety was going to be the thing I was known for or my version of thought leadership. And yet it is the common thread through my whole career and the thing that has opened the most doors. But if I would have worked that in from reverse, it would have been really hard to be like, well, the thing that is also like the most personal to me, which is having lost my mom and like having navigated that grief through my whole life, would have felt like the thing I wanted to protect the most and not share, right? But it's
Yeah.
also like the biggest source of my lived experience and my knowledge. And so I think that thought leadership really is what is at the heart of who you are. And that's different for everyone, right? For me, it started with grief in a lot of ways. But for other people, it's like the trajectory of their career. If they're the first in the company to do XYZ thing, to hold a specific leadership role, to navigate the space that they're in as a whatever it may be. And that is the vessel by which you're trying to pour into other people ultimately.
Yeah. And I think with thought leadership, people think that it's supposed to be some sort of contrarian opinion that you hold, or it has to be like your unique point of view on XYZ. And I think that's where it gets lost because it sounds like the thought leadership that comes from true stories and your most potent lived experience is the thought leadership that's going to connect with people most.
1,000% you want something that people are going to feel like another human is talking to them, right?
Yeah.
And that often isn't the most well-crafted, beautiful thing in a lot of ways, right? Like it can look nice, it can be grammatically correct, it can be an enticing like hook and story. But if your 3-second hook delivers, but the rest of the like 57 seconds of a video piece of content doesn't, you lost them at second 4. And it's the same concept if you're writing something, right? If your hook at the beginning is like really, really strong, but then the rest of your piece feels generic or it feels like someone else could have written it or created it, then you're losing the audience at the most important moment. When in reality, if you would have just slipped a little bit more from yourself, like you were saying at the beginning, if AI is doing XYZ job for you, you should still have your fingerprints over the editing version of that because that's where they're going to be able to meet you. And that is what thought leadership is, right? Like, how can I make sure that the person on the other end of this feels led by me in this conversation and in this moment? And that isn't, it's not easy to get to when you, especially as women, are navigating a space where you're so often told to be quiet and feel smaller than you actually are. And so stepping into that on a personal level is really challenging and requires a lot of momentum on your end. And then stepping into that in front of other people is another step in that.
The vulnerability is like, ooh, I don't know.
Yeah. And it's like, how am I vulnerable with myself? And then how am I vulnerable with someone else? And I think the best part of that, though, is treating those as two different conversations, right? Like if I can practice doing that with myself first, and then I go into like a different environment or a different platform or a bigger audience, that becomes way easier if I'm comfortable doing it by myself when I'm sitting at my desk.
Yes, I think it's because like everything I write, I've already, worked with myself on it, whether it's, just in my head, writing on a physical piece of paper, chatting with someone in a conversation as that thought leadership forms or as that story forms. Sometimes I don't even view it as thought leadership. It's just like, there's this story. I know that other people have this experience too, and I'm going to share it. And then the connection that happens from that is the magic. And I guess, would you say that is thought leadership or?
Oh my God, 100%. I mean, your example brought me back to so many moments where I was writing something or sharing something, actually not writing, or sharing it on Instagram and Medium at the time when I was writing more on Medium, Substack now. And I remember I used to get comments from people being like, I can't believe you're like exploring this on like so publicly. And it's something about like loss or something about anxiety. And I would always wonder, like, do they think this is the first time I've ever thought of this? Because there's like absolutely no way that the first time I'm thinking about my anxiety or my panic attacks is going to be on the internet. Like there has to be some room for me to like do that privately and then come to you with like the finished pretty version of like, this is what I went through and here's the thing. But I think that is what usually stops people from pushing towards thought leadership, right? Is this expectation that they have to work it out in real time in front of other people. And that if they don't, then it's not organic or it's not going to connect with another person, right? But I think the reality is exactly the case you were saying. Your ability to have that workshopping session by yourself or with like a coach or a partner first is the space that you figure that out. And then you go and you say, what are the most human parts that are for others, right? Like I write for myself, I edit for other people.
Yes.
And I think that knowing that difference helps you set a stronger tone when you're putting stuff out there. And thought leadership It's truly whatever you feel you can put out there in a authentic way. It doesn't have to mean that it is instinctually the first thing out of your mind, but it is crafted with your touch. And that makes a difference when you're putting it on, whether you're putting it on LinkedIn or like TikTok, right? I think the things that resonate the most with people are the ones that just make them feel like someone else is also going through that. And that doesn't mean
Completely.
that you have to bleed in front of them, right? Like I think that that's another part that people really think about is like, well, I have to really be hurting and figuring this out in real time for someone to connect with me. And that isn't always true, I think. I think that there's, as long as you give someone a little bit of humanness to hold on to, they're able to kind of fill in the blanks themselves on how they're navigating whatever it is that they're going through and implement it into their lives versus feeling like they have to plug in fully into yours.
Yeah, there's so many good points. I think that you've shared so many that I'm like, which thread do I really want to pull on here? I think that's the beauty of the writing process. You have an incubator period where you're just getting your thoughts out, and then you have the phase where you have the audience in mind. And I think something we talked about before, when we first met, was this concept of like, as a business owner, as a thought leader, you are kind of public, but you're not writing and sharing things for you for some sort of fame. It's that you're growing an ecosystem and you're sharing what's real so that it helps others on their journey. And I want to come back to the moment that you were like, you know what, I'm going to hit publish on something really personal. And so could you share with our listeners, like, what was that moment?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I think that moment happens every single day in my life. I think the first time it happened, I had no understanding that it would turn into what it is now, right? Like I have an audience and I have a career that I've built on this. But the first time I was 21 and I had just lost my grandma she was my legal guardian from the ages of 10 to legally 18, but 21 when that was when she passed, after my mom passed away when I was 10. And so my grandma's passing put me in a position of having to re-lose a mom for the second time, not knowing where to go with that grief, right? Suddenly I was a senior in college. I was about to graduate. My grandmother passed away 2 or 3 months before I graduated. I was interning at magazines, realizing that wasn't the path I was going to follow. I needed to do something else. And I was trying to figure out what to hold on to. Writing always felt like a really safe space for me. And so at that time, I started sharing on Instagram just captions on my posts, really long, like mini essays on what it was like to navigate grief in that way and to lose a parent for the second time. I was her caretaker to navigate being a millennial caregiver at the age of 21 for someone who was 85. And there was a lot there that just like post by post, I started finding myself more and hearing my own voice and talking about my anxiety. And it was in 2014. So that was at a time where like Instagram, it wasn't what it is now when it comes to conversations around mental health or wellness. Like social media wasn't what is now. And so it happened at a time where I came on at the perfect moment where the thing I was sharing was so organic and authentic and it was rising a wave that was already happening kind of within that same ecosystem. And so I was able to platform a larger conversation, given that just I was rising with the wave. That instance, though, was incredibly scary, right? Because it was, to be honest with you, probably scarier than when I had thousands of followers because it was only like 300 or 400 people who knew me.
Yeah, that's so
And
scary.
yeah.
It's the people that know you that you're most afraid of.
And so I'm like, these are people who like I went to college with or I went to high school with, who know me from like when my mom passed away. And so navigating such a small, intimate network of people was a really great boot camp on like how to do it in a larger platform. Because if I didn't care with them, I'm not going to care with like larger numbers. But it also started resonating that like one person who I did know, like who I knew but didn't ever know that they had gone through something similar, but reached out and said, hey, I am dealing with anxiety or I've also lost someone. I would have never known had I not like opened up. And I think I've seen that same formula of reciprocity work every single time I'm sharing anything, right? Whether I'm like, I had this really amazing opportunity to work with this client and like someone else is like, wow, that's so awesome. I want to do something like that. Or like, oh, wow, I just worked with them and this is how I learned from that experience. To from like the most personal point of view of being like, all the essays I still write or all the pieces I write for other publications that are around grief or mental health. having someone else who responds and says like, I also am navigating that, right? Like those are amazing confirmation that the thought leadership isn't dry, right? Like that there isn't
Yeah.
something that it's just about connection, right? Like it sounds so much scarier when you just say like you should do thought leadership. But when you're like, hey, you should connect with more people every day, it's the same exact thing. It's just how do you position it and how do you rate it or like create it.
I love that. Yeah. I think it also takes the pressure off that it has to
Mm-hmm.
look or sound a certain way because people think thought leadership and they're like, oh, that's a LinkedIn article or
Yeah.
an op-ed in a publication. And it's like, well, not necessarily. You can take the pressure off, speak more organically, and then
Mm-hmm.
like yourself, your stories about grief and
Mm-hmm.
your Substack and Good Company. I think that's what they do best is they connect with people. And then you've just created a groundswell of more connection. And I know I've experienced that too. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
followed people and in just their captions, I felt like they were speaking directly to me or we were going through something similar. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the positive side of digital content is that it can do that.
And isn't it wild when you connect with that person, but you followed them for SEO advice?
Yeah.
Right? Like you're like, wait, you and I have like a shared human experience, but the thing I followed you for was like templates. And it was
Yes.
like, it had nothing to do with that. But now I'm like way more committed to you as a person because suddenly you're not just this deliverable I'm trying to like get or like understand more about. It's like, oh, you're human too. And those are really, I think, sweet moments that can often get lost in the mix of, like you said, being like, well, it needs to be 250 words and it needs to have a hook and it needs to have all these different
And a
parts. And you're like,
CTA and 4
yeah.
hashtags.
And you're like, where am I in the mix of that? And I think that when I work with clients, a lot of the stuff that I do is just like, how do I bring you back up here and say, like, but who are you as a person and what do you want to stand for and what do you want to talk about? And we can frame that and form that into a thing that will convert for you in a different way if that's the goal. Because there's nothing wrong with wanting conversion from something or from wanting someone to
Yeah.
connect with your content in a different way. But there is like a human way to do that. And I think that there's room for that in the conversation.
Yeah, something I stumbled upon in a conversation with some fellow women entrepreneurs over the weekend was that a lot of times, like business or content in this
Mm-hmm.
example, is a structure. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
medium here. And whether that medium is Substack or an newsletter, LinkedIn post, Instagram, whatever, it's the magic that flows through that.
Mm-hmm.
And same with business. Business is a structure, but we create something and that is malleable and it can take shape in so many different forms and it flows through the structure of the business to reach more people. And so
Mm-hmm.
content is very similar. And I think people get hung up on the structure and they forget the magic.
Oh my gosh, it is like when you and I first chatted and I was telling you about I worked on a middle grade book and over the last like year and a half. And I'm with an agent now and we're shopping it around. And when I was writing it, every single step through this process, finding the agent, taking it out, has felt so universe guided, right? Like it is, I'm the vessel and like the book is the vessel. And I have never felt that level of alignment with anything else I've created. And it was a very big lesson in surrendering and release. And it wasn't because I was telling myself, hey, surrender. It was like, I'm here for something way bigger than this. And like, I'm the person putting it down on paper. And I'm lucky that this specific idea came to me and I get to do this. Like, that feels like the honor for me. But where it goes and the magic that it is touching it, that has nothing to do with me. Like that is like I am just fortunate to be like in the presence of whatever this magic is. And I've loved every single step of this process because it has allowed me to remember that that's probably how my favorite books were created. Right? Like it's how every single piece of thing that I've loved and enjoyed so thoroughly, it was people who just believed that they were just their job wasn't to shapeshift this, it was to protect the shape it already came in and give it to you and say, like, here, like, this is what I want to hand to you because I know it's going to help you on your journey. And whether you use it or not is no longer my responsibility, but I'm giving it to you. And I think that that's really, really awesome. And it's a cool place to create from. And it's something that I think can get lost in translation when you're so focused on like, we have to hit certain metrics and we have to do certain things because those things are important, right? Like I needed to get an agent, so I needed to do a certain number of queries to get it out to where I needed to go. But when you have the larger, like, I'm doing this for a specific reason, or I'm doing this because it feels like it's an integrity for whatever I'm feeling, those hard moments in between, it doesn't feel as difficult or like as tense because you're just kind of flowing with all of it.
Yeah, alignment is so important. And that's a word I
Mm-hmm.
hear from probably every single client I've ever worked with is they're
Mm-hmm.
like, I know there are business structures. I know there are a million different strategies I could use, but I'm really trying to find alignment because that's when things are flowing and it feels
Mm-hmm.
easy and it feels right. Writing wise, I know Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this in her book,
Mm-hmm.
Big Magic, and The Artist's Way. Julia Cameron, same thing.
Oh
Love,
my gosh, we
love
can
The
talk
Artist's
like a
Way.
30-minute episode just on the artist way.
Listeners, if you
Yeah.
don't know The Artist's Way, it's basically, I think it's 12 weeks. Each chapter is a week. And it's all about reclaiming your creativity and whatever that looks like for you, you know, whether it's writing or photography or cinema. And it is total magic. Like, I think most serious writers have gone through it at least once because, again, it just brings you back to the heart of finding what's aligned. And there's this philosophy that with creativity, it's opening yourself up to the
Mm-hmm.
stories that want to come through to you. And it sounds like with your book, that's exactly what happened.
Oh my gosh, I was doing the artist way while I was writing it. So it's so funny you're saying it because I've done it 3 times. I did the first time in 2020, I believe, and then I've done it, I guess, almost every other year-ish since then. And I had just been thinking about starting it again, and you're like the fourth mention of it this week. And I'm like, okay, so then I have to start it because like you're the fourth synchronicity of like I had this thought and
Whoa.
yeah, and I was like, this is kind of wild. But I think that it is one of the best workbooks for figuring out, and you don't have to be a writer to take a lot from it. You just have to want to be creative and more creative in whatever you're doing than you are right now. And you have an appetite for a little bit more. And it unpacks so much for you. Like it gives you these tools that allow you to ask these questions of like, what are my thoughts on money? Like, what are my thoughts around what I create and what I put out into the world and how much I'm getting back from the world as a result of that? And how do I feed myself creatively, not just feed everyone else creatively? I've seen such success doesn't even feel like the right word for it. I've just seen so much improvement in my own life across the board from having experienced it. So really, it is hilarious that you brought it up because I was thinking about it. I'm like, you are the fourth person or fourth thing that has mentioned it to me in the last. It's only Wednesday. And I'm like, okay, so I have to start it this weekend.
That's your sign. That's your green light.
Yeah, genuinely. But
It
I do
was
think,
so, yeah, it was
yeah, go
so
ahead.
powerful for me too. I think for me, it reinvoked this sense of play. And I know there's a
Yeah.
chapter about play and just how creative you can be in other parts of your life, like with cooking or
Hmm.
the route you take on a run. There's so many opportunities for creativity in our lives that can bleed over into other areas.
And it's not, I think that that is also where I've seen so much of a change in the online space over the last 10 years, right? From 2014 to 2025. How much monetization has had a factor in the kind of content that we consume, but also the kind of content we create on the internet and like what what am I doing? And if I'm doing it, is it going to make me money? And if it's going to make me money, then I'll do it. But if it's not going to make me money, why am I doing it? And I think that doing the artist way just reminds me constantly that creativity isn't supposed to be synonymous all the time with profit,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, or with the one thing that does bring me profit, right? It can make me better at writing, which brings me profit, but it also makes me more creative in the kitchen and it makes me more creative in the way I love people and it makes me more creative in the way I treat myself. And I think that those are all things that end up feeding ultimately the thing that does make you money, right? And that it gets all interconnected, but we lose sight of that unless we try really, really hard to not lose sight of it, I think.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking we should do the artist way together.
I know, right? Can we? Because I was like, I should put this on my Substack and just ask, like, who wants to do this together? Because I'm going to start it again.
Yeah, I'm down to
Yeah.
co-lead that with you because I think there are so many people that could go through it and benefit from it. So
Hmm.
shout out if you want to do the artist way with us. Join the wait list in the
Genuinely,
link.
literally, right? I would 100% do that because I think that so the first time I did it with a group and it is different doing it with a group that you're talking through it with, like having an accountability buddy, than it is doing by yourself. Both of them are marvelous experiences. You get something different each time. But I also don't think that people should be scared if you've done it before, doing it again. Like there's not a timetable on how often you can do it. I'm realizing, and I told myself that because a little bit of what I was telling myself was like, well, you just did it last year. What are you going to get if you do it this year? And I'm like, well, I can get a lot, right? The universe is obviously telling me, like, put this on your calendar. Boom. I think there is something there.
4 times.
I know, right? 4 times is a charm.
I think that brings up a point too, is synchronicities, and when you get these little signs and feel them, notice them. And I think that's something we talked about before too, that I did not expect for it to come up in our conversation, but this sense of like, yeah, there are signs from the universe sometimes, and they're little nudges that can push you in the right direction.
And you just have to be open to them, right? And what does that mean? Because I think people, especially like a meditation world, wellness world, say like you just have to be open to the signs. As someone who has been open and not open, it's frustrating when you're not. And you're like, well, what I'm trying, what am I like, what am I supposed to be looking for? And I think it's so personal, right? Like I find a lot of the universe at play with repetition. And so like if I'm seeing a number repeat a lot or a name, like right now I'm seeing the name of my main character in the book everywhere. And I'm like, okay, like this is like a little sign from the universe. So like I'm on the right track. Things are happening as they should be. Like the timing of my life is correct. And I'm not anywhere. I'm exactly where I need to be. But I think that that sensitivity to the world is what it means to just be really open to the synchronicities. Is like I'm looking up more than I'm looking down. And when I'm looking up, I'm looking around. And so that will talk to you in whatever ways that are feel personal to you. Right. I think I was just really prone, and we talked a little bit about this in our first conversation, but I was just really prone to noticing because I wanted nothing more at 13, 15, 16 than to have a sign from my mom telling me that she was there, right? I lost her when I was 10. It was like a haze of a time for like 2-ish years being like, what is even happening? And then I went to high school and I was like, wow, I really miss her. Like, she's not going to be here for this. And that's when I started seeing the number 13 around often. And there was just something about it that made me feel like it was her. And I've seen it in every moment that I've needed that and that I've needed that little reminder. And I think there's magic in that, right? So, but I was looking from the perspective of need, of like, I am lonely and I want you to tell me that you're here and I can't communicate with you. So how can you do that? And there was just something that spoke to me. But then it's also trusting your intuition. And like, what do entrepreneurs know more than trusting their intuition? That's what you base your whole entire career off of.
What you signed up for.
Yeah, literally. And so it's like, if I can just use that same little skill set to then be like, let me listen for other things in my life or for that next idea, I think the skills are totally transferable.
Completely. Yeah. Sensitivity to the world. I think that those few words are something to hang on to, because I've been playing with this concept of just asking. So a couple weeks ago, I'd be like, I'd like to see a sign of a fuzzy star today. And then I would go about my day. And then it's so funny because later that day, I was shopping for cowboy boots of all things. And I came across a pair of cowboy boots that had stars on them and they were fuzzy. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, sign received. I got it. But then last week I did it. I was chatting with my husband on Monday over dinner, and he was like, "Do you have any like intentions this week?" I was like, "Ooh, interesting question." And I was like, "I would love to sign a private client this week. Work with someone for 6 months, like really one of those women that just click with, and I can really impact and help grow her business and help her feel like a more aligned leader." I signed a client that Thursday.
I love this.
And then not just that, but right after she submitted her application to become a client, I got in my car and I communicate with like songs, like song names are typically signs for me. Or when certain songs come on, I know like this person that has maybe passed in my life is like sending me a sign. But when I got in my car, this song called Just Ask was on. I was like, okay, sometimes you can just ask for a sign. And then if you're open to it, you'll notice it.
It's crazy. Like not crazy actually, it was amazing. often we're asking these questions in our head and then the answers are there, but we're not looking, right? And so then you're like, well, you want it to look like one specific thing or whatever, and then you miss it in those moments. But I think that there's so much magic. Like, that's so awesome. Like, that you just ask and then the universe delivers in one shape or form. And I think I'd be interested in hearing what people think about this too, because I do think that the major part and a big part in playing there is the ability to feel worthy enough for those answers, right? To feel like I'm worthy for something like that to happen and that it's not just a small coincidence that is like not a part of my story. It's a major coincidence that's meant to be something I notice and like hold on to and feel into for the next thing.
Can you receive it?
And I
Yeah.
think so much of your work is that, right? Is like helping women feel like they can, or entrepreneurs in general, feel like they can receive it, like they can align and then build on that and continue to expand upon that. And that is both a lesson to learn and a lesson to unlearn, right? Like you have to unlearn the stuff that is making you feel like you can't do that and then
Yes.
relearn new things.
Yeah. Unwind and then wind.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I think coming back to thought leadership and sharing what's on your heart and allowing receiving others when they connect with that too. I think one thing I wanted to come back to was, when we do share and we do find that like, oh, a friend started to follow like your content or like follow this stuff that feels vulnerable to share. I don't know. I would love to hear what goes on for you, but for
Mm-hmm.
me and where I'm at, like when strangers follow me, sure. But when I have my friend's mom start to follow me, I like clam up and
Mm-hmm.
I feel myself pull back. And I think part of it is fear of judgment. I think part of it is that I now feel so open, like I'm sharing
Mm-hmm.
my whole self. And that's beautiful, but it's also scary when people only know one facet of you. And I'm sure this is something that you've sat with over the years because you've been doing this for so
Yeah.
long. But what goes on for you?
I think it's very similar. I definitely clam up. And I'm also cognizant of no matter how honest I am on the internet, how much my thought leadership, my writing, how much I put out there, it is never fully who I am because it can't be. Right. And also, when you share so much of, I think sometimes sharing the most intimate or no, sharing the health related parts of you, right? Like the mental health, the wellness, the things that feel like really personal can often feel synonymous with this is who you are as a whole. And I think that comes back to the narrative of diminishing people to one thing, right? And saying like, well, if you have anxiety, then that's all you are. And I think that that is just a whole another conversation. But I say this because throughout the years, I've had to learn that I am not that, just that, right? And when someone follows me and they see just that, and my initial knee-jerk reaction is like, oh no, they're gonna see all of me and they're gonna think that this is all I am. I can't control what the other person thinks, even if they know me in different contexts or not. And also, I think something that has given me solace over the years is remembering that I can take back what I give. That the internet is not a permanent contract that says that if I have shared this before, I need to share it again and I need to share it in the same exact way.
Or that it's still,
Yeah. And I think that there is like I am 32 now. I was 21-ish whenever I started posting on the internet, like I'll like actively posting on the internet. I was like dating in my 20s, right? I was like with my fiance now, but my boyfriend then, like am way more on the internet. We got engaged a year and a half ago almost. No one knew. Like I didn't put it on the internet. And so I think of that as like such a lovely moment of like growth for me on not that that makes it better or worse, right? It's just like it's different for me. It was where I was and not where I am anymore. And I think that that's just me allowing myself to claim the narrative I want to claim on the internet and to
yeah,
not have that imposed on me. And I think that that is the best way to navigate it when someone else is following you that you know personally is like, I don't have to claim what I think they're going to think of me. I can simply release that and say, this is what I am putting out there today of who I am in this exact moment may not be who I am 5 minutes ago, and that may not be who I am in another 5 minutes. But like it is true and honest and still only a slice of it.
Yeah, this is such a good learning even for me, because it's true. When you're sharing, you do feel like you're like naked in front of the world, but that's not true. And you can still keep parts of your life private. And it honestly brings up the question to me, like, does anyone really know our whole selves besides us? And no,
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think that I mean, I've been in therapy for 10 years. I can tell you, I don't even know my full self. I am like in therapy, sometimes walking out being like, wow, that was a new layer to the onion I did not realize was there. And you think about it, right? I've been there for 10 years. And every time I have those moments, I'm like, wow, we've been here for 10 years. The fact that this is just coming out feels like it should have been like one of the first things. But also sometimes you need to peel back a lot to get to the like, this is where I am now. And I think the same thing is true with the internet. Like, you can put, I think about this a lot when people are transitioning from roles. And like a thought leader on like LinkedIn is posting about their one job as the SVP at one company, and then they get laid off and they're going into a different company. And suddenly they feel some level of shame of the past and what that career looked like and how it manifested or how it ended mostly. And I think that that is such a great example of I'm able to bring the good stuff from that, even if it ended in a way that I wish it hadn't, or that I have shame about because I think other people think a specific thing around it. But when you take a step back and you're like, what's the integrity here? Like, what is the narrative, the thread that I can pull on that makes me still feel like I'm in alignment with myself, right? And that's where I think so much of that conversation we were having on alignment is it supersedes any specific piece of content, any specific role, any specific project, because you're just like, if I am this person, no matter where I am sitting and standing, then I can be this person no matter what. And I am motivated by that same thing. And I think when you have that true north, it makes moments like that where you feel like incredibly exposed, feel you put it in the right bucket and you say, like, that is someone else. And that's what I think about what I think someone else is thinking about me. And it's normal and human to have those reactions. And it's also normal and human to want to leave it there and to not want to take it into dinner,
Yes.
because that's not my business.
Completely. Yeah. It's so funny psychologically what happens when we share things on our heart with the world. And I think this alignment piece, how you're saying it supersedes all, something I've been thinking about recently is like, what is the heart of my business that will not change? Like, what is the thing
Mm-hmm.
that I find that when I'm in discussion, like my voice is raised, not in a negative way, but just because I'm passionate about it. And
Mm-hmm.
it feels like this endless well of motivation that's never going to go away. And I feel like I've
Mm-hmm.
always had it. And I think for me, that's definitely passion when it comes to women doing what they love and being successful at it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want women to make money from what they're doing in an aligned way, not just to make money for money's sake, but because it allows them to make decisions for themselves. It gives
Mm-hmm.
them freedom. It allows them to take care of their families. It gives them opportunity that women 50 years ago, 100 years ago didn't
Mm-hmm.
have. I'm like so passionate about
Yeah.
rights around this stuff. I'm curious, what do you know yours?
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that because I operate in the same exact way. I'm like, especially we had this conversation earlier too, where both of our work is split between the stuff that we do under our own name, that's like our byline stuff, like the stuff we are creating, and then the stuff we do to support other people. And I felt along the way that the only way that I can do those two things and feel whole and not feel disjointed was to have something that I felt connected both of them. And that helped me a lot. And for me, I just like to tell stories that help other people. That's it. And I get to do that sometimes on like the behind the scenes of like helping a brand or an organization tell the right stories for the people that they're trying to serve. Or I do it for myself when I write stories that are fiction, when I write personal essays that are nonfiction. At the end of the day, I just like telling stories. And my hope is always that they help someone else. But like when you simplify it to that much, and like, you know what it is too? I like the like phrase in there is something that a lot of people I think shy away from. And they're like, well, I should want this, or I feel obligated to this, or I feel responsible for this. But the only way you keep doing this on the hard days is if you really, really like it and you feel really pulled and you're loud about it and you're like in a room that is really quiet and you're the loudest person, like what is the thing that you want to feel the loudest about? And that only comes up, I think, like you said, like if you feel like you're in total alignment with whatever it is.
Yeah. Like, let's pretend you have a mic for 5 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and you're talking to 1,000 people. What do you want to talk about in those 5 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And then using that, I want to talk about your book too,
Yeah.
because you wrote this book. It was aligned. It just came
Mm-hmm.
through you. I know you tried a book before, but it didn't feel aligned. This one does. You're shopping it around. So I guess, could you just speak more about like
Yeah.
this process that you're in?
It is very interesting to be in this space and talking about alignment. So I've been writing professionally for the last 10 years under my own name. And so much of that work has been personal essays and like firsthand accounts of what it's like to live like with grief and mental health. So the first projects that I pulled together as book proposals were that, right? They were like, oh, this feels like the most organic thing next step, right? Like I should be doing this. I should be writing and proposing a book of personal essays because of course I should.
That's what you were doing. So
Yeah. I was like,
monetize it as
mm-hmm.
the world tells you.
Literally, right? So it's like monetize it. Let's just do the next big thing that comes with that. And I was so anxious through those process, right? Like when we took those books out, I was in a good place. And I've been thinking about it a lot because right now I'm in a great place. It's not to say that things are happening quickly or they're happening like, it just means that I'm in a good place. Like I'm quiet and peaceful about it. And I think the biggest difference there has just been the project that it is. Like I'm not doing a personal essay driven book proposal. It's a middle grade fiction book about a little girl who has lost her mom. So that is similar and it's a lot of that experience, but it is a experience I wish I had, not one I had. She's in the driver's seat of being able to tell the kids in her class that her mom died and that she doesn't have a mom anymore. That wasn't an experience I had in my personal life. And so I wanted to give that, like to have a kid feel empowered to tell that narrative and own that story in a way that made sense for them. That's 100% different from like, let's pitch a personal essay like book that is driven mostly by like a book proposal. I've learned this too. When you're creating a book proposal that's more on the nonfiction side, it's 3 chapters of the book that you're trying to sell, but it is 40 something pages of like a marketing proposal. It is who do you know? What is the book about? What's the demographic it's going to?
What audience do you have?
Yeah, what audience do you have already? How are you going to publicize this book when it goes out? Where have you been featured? Like it is all about the transactional aspects of who you are as a person, very little about the writing aspect of who you are as a person, right? Like you do have to be a good writer, but like it is a lot less poignant in that. With this book, my agent is just sending out the book and it's just a PDF of like the manuscript. And I was like, what do you mean? Like it was coming up against all the marketing side of me being like, so that's it? Like you're just like here?
Just the book?
Just the book?
Sure?
So then, of course, like I still like over delivered and I like put together like a really nice deck and like a website that I told her like to also include in the mix. But like I looked at the Squarespace analytics on the website. It's like a password protected one. No one has looked at it, right? Like, and like, so like even the editors who are reading it right now are just interested in the book. And like they probably looked at the deck that she also attached as a PDF, which is similar to the website. So they maybe didn't feel like the need to. But I was like, wow, not even out of curiosity did they go and look at the website. And I think in another version of myself, I would have felt so defeated by that and been like, oh my gosh. But now I'm like, oh, like maybe that's just enough. Like maybe I'm enough with just whatever I've written.
Yeah.
And I think that integrity and that alignment is the only thing that has helped keep me feeling like this project is wherever it ends up, whether it ends up at a traditional publisher, whether I self-publish, whatever it looks like, it feels like the right project for who I am right now. And when it comes to thinking about writing a book of your own, I think that is, as someone who has done it both ways, I would go with the thing you want to write, not the thing you feel like you should write. Because
100%.
Yeah, because you will feel like you will feel like you through the process of trying to sell it, which is at its core still a sales project, right? Like
Right.
you can't get away from like the nitty gritty of like having to think about like, oh, well, I hope this sells to like this person. There's still a part of it that feels a little bit more dry, right? And more transactional. And that's okay. There's nothing bad about that. But I think that there are ways that you can still hold on to like that little thread or like that mission if it's the right product. And I can see how much I was spinning out of control with the last one and being like, oh, it just wasn't for me. Like it wasn't the right thing.
there are a lot of writers in this audience or people
Mhm.
who've thought about writing a book, and that's such a good tip of just write what you want.
Mhm.
I've written a couple of novel drafts, but they were for experimentation sakes, or I
Mhm.
found that I created this novel plot, like I almost over engineered it, started writing, and then fell out of love with it because it was
Mhm.
what I thought I should write, not what I wanted to. And I think coming back to you, this is a middle-aged novel. It's for, you know,
Middle
middle-aged
grade.
kid, middle
Yeah.
grade. And it's so different from what you've done in the past, what you've written about, but the mission is clear there,
Mhm.
it's what you would have wanted. And something we talked about before is how funny it is that adults want that
Yeah.
nonfiction. They want the 7 steps. They want you to teach them, but middle grade, they're like, nah, don't tell me what
Yeah.
to do.
That's so funny. I forgot we talked about that, but it's 100, like that is probably one of the things that helped me as I was writing too, was thinking about who am I serving? Like if my mission is to write a story that helps other people feel less alone and like understood, then this is a different audience than who I usually write for, right? Because I write for women like me, 20, 30s, 40s. If I'm writing for a 12-year-old, like who was I at 12? Who are 12-year-olds now? Yeah, I really sat with the fact that like as adults, all we want is for someone to solve our problems. Like we want the solution to the thing, and life, certain parts of life don't have solutions. Like I will be grieving my mom for the rest of my life. It's been 22 years. Like I will be grieving her when I become a mom, when I get married, when I like have all of these milestones and like the days in between. A kid is okay with that. Like a kid doesn't want to have power over, and I really thought about that when I was writing. It's like a kid doesn't want to have power over whether this ever ends. They want to have power over how they show up. And I think that they are honestly the best thought leaders we can learn from, which is like they only want to feel like they're fully showing up as themselves in integrity all the time. And if they have environments where they can do that and not feel like they need to hide, then they really show up as themselves. I think we lose that along the way, and I think I've been trying to get it back. And I think the artist way was one of those tools that I use to try to like really tap back into myself and be like, well, what do I want? And like, what is like the little kid inside of me really, really want to be doing? And how can I facilitate that as the adult version of myself?
Yeah. Yeah. How can we take care of the kid parts of ourselves with the adult parts, but
Hmm.
then actually take care of our adult parts?
Yeah, because all we want is to just feel happy and like good and like at peace. And I think we lose that sometimes when life gets really hectic and heavy and like so much of life feels like a formula we're supposed to be following. And if you're not following it in this way, then it feels like you're failing. And that's all really true. And also, I think that there are ways to navigate through that that makes you feel like a little bit more whole. And I think that that's something I've been really holding on to over the last few years is like all I want is to just feel whole and
Yeah.
what gets me there and how what keeps me there too.
Completely. And
Mm-hmm.
stories help us there. Like
Mm-hmm.
fiction specifically, humanity has used stories forever. That's how we create meaning. It's how we pass on meaning. And again, I think they allow us to connect to ourselves, that integrity, that alignment, but show us sometimes there's not a right way. Sometimes there's not a solution. I think that's what your book and many characters in books do. I can like vividly remember reading certain books at 12, 14, 16, where there was something about the main character that felt like me. And then seeing what they did in the book, I felt more empowered
Mm-hmm.
to live my life. So I feel like could cry. I just feel like your book is really going to
I
reach the right
appreciate that.
people
But
and
it,
be so impactful.
thank you. I wanted to say too, like, you mentioned that you've written a couple of novels and have left them to start the next one and stuff. And I think that that is also so valuable. Like, I don't think that every single thing we create or write is supposed to see the light of day.
True.
Like, or it's supposed to have other people see it. Well, that's the better part of it. I think everything we think about, we should create in some capacity. Like, I think we should make it for ourselves. But like, I think that there is a love letter to yourself in each of those characters that you left half open. That you were like,
Very
you know
true.
what? Like, I needed you in that moment. I don't need you anymore. And I don't think anyone else maybe needs you in this way that I needed you. But it's enough to know that I had this tool and that I put you on paper and that you and I worked through something together. And now I'm going to go over here and do something else. And Like if that's not magic, I don't know what is.
Well articulated. Yes. I think I've learned with each novel, plot, or draft something about myself, my writing style.
Mhm.
But the characters, the little quotes, the little sentences that feel like they just stream out of you without any
Mhm.
thought, they definitely reflect back different facets of us and what we're going through. And so I think that's really important to remember. So thank you for that and sharing with our people.
Thank you. I think it's as anyone listening, if you're thinking about thought leadership, I think it's important to think not just in the clouds. It's to like practice and write it down. And if you find your voice after 10 different pieces of thought leadership that you're creating in your own style, it doesn't make the last nine not worth it. It means that it got you to where you needed to be to get to the right one that you want to put out, and that process is as important.
Yeah, completely. Well, Vivian, I'm so excited for your book to come out. We're definitely going to share with our listeners when it does. And your Substack will be in the show notes. The Artist Way. I'm so excited to do it with you.
Yes, please. Let's do it. I am so down for this. If anyone else wants to join us, this is what we will be doing and like for the next we'll figure out when we start, but then after that for the next 12 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. And I did it alone the first time, and the whole time I was thinking I want to do this with people next time. So I'm very
Let's do
excited.
it. Yes.
Is there anything you want to leave with our listeners? Any like final thoughts or anything you want to plug?
I think that I hope that they end this episode with the way we started it, with just taking a few minutes to just breathe right after the conversation and just kind of tap into and write down whatever may have come up for you that maybe feels like a little tiny nugget, but it's like one of those moments that it's like, oh, maybe that's the thing that I'm supposed to be thinking about today or noodling on or growing upon. Because I think there's value in just like being quiet for a second. So that's what I would leave them with. You said you're going to put all the other things in the show notes, and that's enough for me.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much for being here, for sharing your words, your experience, your wisdom. And yeah, with that, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you follow and subscribe for future episodes, that you leave a rating. Those 5-star reviews go a long way. We love them. And with that, we will chat next time. Thanks.